C-ship practically is designed both for individual professionals, but also for organizations. We are aware that the culture and creative industries encompass a large variety of sectors, but we would like to focus mainly on 5 sectors, which are cinema and audiovisual production, culture institutions and museums, built heritage, adaptive reuse, performing arts, and design. We have 3 ad hoc professional training courses. One is addressing individuals and 2 for organizations. I'm happy also to announce that we received a regional subsidy to cover the individual course, which will kick off in February. And more information and the registration will open in mid-January on RLICC website. The main objective of C-ship is to make culture sustainable, impactful, and viable. And it has 5 main pillars, which are business and operation model innovation, ecosystem partnership building, internal and external governance, technology and sustainability and positive impact. And this is why we're hosting 5 free webinars in order to trigger interest around these topics. I would like now to introduce our 3 bright speakers, starting with Dr. Hanna Szemző, who has a PhD in history, master's degree in sociology and history. She is one of the managing directors of the Metropolitan Research Institute, an independent think tank in Budapest. She has experience in research and consultancy in the fields of urban renewal, social inclusion, housing, welfare, and governance analysis. Currently, she is coordinating Horizon 2020 research projects Open Heritage, and she focuses on the intersection of adaptive heritage reuse and urban development, working towards finding sustainable management models for community-led reuse initiatives applicable in marginalized environments. Hanna will be speaking about democracy and heritage management, success and failures.
Thank you, Ruba. And it's really actually a bit frightening to be in such a company, but I'll do my very, very best. Ruba has already said all great things about me. I think what matters most is that I'm a sociologist and that what influences my take on heritage and heritage management. I've worked on various projects in this, from this perspective for a long time now. And what it was difficult a bit to gauge about the audience and the knowledge of the audience. So I decided to give you a general introduction that I would find interesting as an audience, and also decided to include 3 cases, but would like to encourage you to ask questions when you want. So what we do see is when we talk about democracy and democratizing heritage management, that the communities are in the air. There's a lot of talk about communities, that they should be involved, and there's a lot of talk about heritage communities. It's very obvious that when it comes to the heritage management system, it's a bit outdated. The governance, the heritage protection governance is a bit too rigid. Even today, despite the changes, it's still too much building and site focus, and often has difficulty understanding and managing the intangible aspects around the site, and has even more difficulty supporting the heritage communities around the site. A very particular problem that we saw in our studies is that when it comes to policies, there are a few countries that specifically support and regulate adaptive heritage reuse, but these policies mostly lack in most European countries, giving too much space for uncertainty. And probably one of the most important things that actually I think have been very instrumental in supporting the democratization process is that the capacities of heritage institutions are very, very limited. So besides some sites that are known nationally and internationally, there are many local sites that are typically crumbling, and new models are needed, new and democratic models are needed to really use them. So what we do see is, if you look at different charters, different international charters, most importantly Faro Convention, that there is the wind of change coming. There's very obvious that their diversification of stakeholders is apparent, and you can observe a changing hierarchies of people involved. What we do see is that there's a changing role about who finances heritage. Often it means that it's open to so philanthropists and even enterprises get involved. And I think what's most important is there's also a very obvious aim to reach out to formerly untouched terrains. This is actually in line with the changing attitude of tourists. Before COVID, it was very obvious that tourists became ready to discover new territories and they wanted to go to new places. It's also obvious, and then part of this change is there is this increasingly inclusive understanding of what heritage is. So next to touristic aims, especially on the local level, community aims become also very important. And what is an important observation that has been that these changes have been less apparent on the top of this heritage management structure and significantly more apparent on the local level. You can go to the next slide, Ruba. Thank you. There are, of course, these are all very positive processes, but at the same time, there are big challenges. I listed 4 here. There are 4 different branches. So there is, of course, there is also a partial loss of, there is a loss of structure, institutional structure. Something that seemed to be very concrete and well regulated is a bit less regulated now, especially or partially in the local level. So somehow the expectations and the institutional structures do need to find a new balance. This comes, I think, in line with another type, which I listed the 3rd, is that we talk a lot about community, but it's very difficult to define the community. And often there are conflicting interests within a community. So involving a community and telling what the community opinion is easier said than done. There is also what matters is what I said is there is a positive thing is that there is diversification of financial resources. At the same time, when it's often together that there's less money available, which means there is more dependency on the business sector. I think formerly there was less talk about the need to create sustainable business plans. It's both a positive and a negative development at the same time. And the last one, it's because, I think in line, because that these former structures are somehow being dissolved. Some of these local projects have difficulty defining their main goals. It was so easy before because, it was you wanted to save a site that was of national or international importance, but with the local sites, the aims and the goals are more difficult to define. You can go to the next one. So often what happens is that I would see in this situation, I would call them, you need new heroes. This democratization process needs new heroes. And these new heroes are the NGOs and often the academic sector. It's, again, was said that democratization is easier said than done. Because to be a democratic process needs knowledge, networks, and time from the part of the participants. And NGOs and often academic people, I know not every time, you as an academic, you don't feel it all the time, but still there is typically more time to be engaged in projects like this than in other vacations. So this is why they can enter this new field. What's also very important is that these initiatives, these democratic initiatives, are quite typical. I mean, based on my experience, it's something I mentioned, they are of a particular type of heritage. They are typically of local relevance. Also going back to for the new heroes to be successful, they also need supporters, then these supporters are always the municipality. In the cases that I will very briefly show you, the municipality is always in the background. It has different roles, but they cannot, I mean, what has been a very, very important lesson for me lately, that the success of this democratic heritage protection very much rests on the local democratic processes of a municipality. What's important that in these new situation, in these new heritage initiatives, you know, the new heroes, be they academics or NGOs, often position themselves as the voice of the community. This, as said before, can be a bit problematic because it's just very hard to gauge what is really the community opinion. And maybe a last point here, that often the initiatives, they sometimes have touristic aims, but mostly the reuse of a site and reclaiming it for neighborhood and connecting it with neighborhood development go in hand. So all of a sudden the aims become more fluid on one hand and more connected to everyday users on the other hand. You can go to the next slide. So in the slide, I will show you 3 cases now. One will be about a bakery in Warsaw, one an abandoned bakery in Warsaw, one abandoned bakery, an abandoned market hall in Bratislava, and the third one is about an abandoned convent in Naples. I'll be very brief because I see I'm running out of time. So if you would need, but what I would like to highlight a few interesting things. May I ask you, Ruba, to go and show, because first the pictures, there are 5 pictures about the bakery and the neighborhood. And I will talk, okay, so this is the bakery, which is a former industrial building situated in the Prague neighborhood of Warsaw, which is a former industrial site or area of Warsaw on the other side of the Vistula River, the other in a sense of Edward Said. So the other that's looked down, that's neglected. But with the subway coming to Prague, gentrification processes started to begin. You can go and show the next 4. There are 4 pictures altogether. This is, I think, very typical, the graffiti. This is how it looks like. And now going back to the bakery, one more. Okay, then you can see. And then please go back to the slide again. Sorry, it's very, very embarrassing to really say these things. So what's interesting, and I have been following this project, it started 4 years ago, that as part of Open Heritage, actually, a group of architects and local professionals, and I would like to emphasize both that they are well-educated people, started to work on a general concept of how to bring back life to the entire neighborhood. And their concept has been somehow to retain the local, to bring back the small, to somehow try to bring back an idealized version of the neighborhood that seems to be vanished forever. And they would like to use this bakery as a starting point for development, to anchor their project there. They had lots of local meetings, and they do have a very, very good relationship with the local municipality. So this is a case where actually there is no yet a heritage management model. The reason why I actually chose it, because there was no time to do it, they are working towards pressuring a bit the municipality to find a tenant who would use the site in a way that's both financially viable and at the same time would support these not gentrifying revitalization processes in the Prague neighborhood. However, and what I find that quite interesting, that when they talk about the area, they refer a lot to how Prague should look like, or what's good for the community. And I know I've repeated it over and over again, but I'm personally not convinced that the people residing in Prague right now are very much against the current changes. So this is something that I think when we talk about democratization, we need to keep in mind, that we as sociologists, architects, or different kind of academics tend to have certain values and tend to represent these values in the name of other people who actually might not be in agreement with that. I think I'm running out, so I will go very quickly to the other ones, the other two cases. The one is yes, this is about an abandoned market hall. I will also ask Ruba first to show the two pictures. This is a market hall in Bratislava, and this has actually been refurbished and running already. It used to be abandoned, but what happened is that, again, a group of concerned professionals created an alliance, and they wanted to do something with the building, both to bring back food and actually the feeling of market to the downtown of Bratislava, and not to let the building despair. It was also in line with, first, they functioned as an advisory board to the municipality, but the end in 2013, they signed an agreement and they started a rent to invest scheme. So they rent the municipal property for €1 per month, and they can use the site, and in return they have to invest €10,000 to slowly refurbish it. Importantly, and it gets a question about transparency and to what extent you can oversee these developments and how you can control this. There was no open procurement model there, but actually they created a 15-year-old agreement with the municipality. They right now do a lot of social functions. They have, as you have seen the pictures, have refurbished the building quite substantially, and I think they actually did create an ideal mix. So they did create an ideal democratic heritage management model. With the board of directors consisting of both of the members of the alliance and the municipality. So there's obviously a good oversight of how this building functions. What could be a question is to what extent this model is replicable. But so far, this is actually one of the most successful cases about, let's say, a democratic heritage adaptive reuse that I know of. And the last one is that I wanted to mention quickly. It's a bit more, it's again a significantly more successful one than the Warsaw one. It's in Naples. It's a former convent of the Capuchin fathers that was abandoned a long time ago. It was built originally in the 16th century. That was turned into a commons project. It's very radically democratic. And again, as with the other two cases, this democratization process and heritage protection process and reuse process would have been unimaginable without the support of the local municipality. It's a bottom-up experiment where basically a local organization called Scacco Matto occupied this area in 2015. And in 2016, the municipality recognized it as an emerging commons project. It already paid even then the utility costs, but it actually received in 2019 money for the restoration. What's maybe very important, but that with the support of the municipality, it's totally self-governed. It has become a neighborhood center with various services provided for the neighborhood. What could be interesting, and I think that we will see after the pandemic, that there could be tensions lying ahead, how this restoration process can go ahead and whether it can be done in line with community needs or future vision. So there, I think it's as much as I love radical democratic processes, there are the potential of institutional clashes. That was very briefly what I wanted to say. I think I was also over time. I'm sorry for that.
Thank you very much, Hanna, for this fantastic presentation. Actually, you provided us with a lot of food for thought, starting by stating that the heritage management system is a bit outdated and managing the intangible aspects and the heritage communities are one of the most critical issues at stake You also explained the four main challenges which you actually researched during the project, and the concept of the new heroes and the different levels of democratization in the three different models which you presented. I have lots of questions which we will come back to after Koen's presentation, which I think is very much in line with the idea of fairness and democratization of the heritage processes. Our second speaker is Professor Koen van Balen, who is the full professor at KU Leuven Civil Engineering Department. He is the acting director of the Raymond Lemaire International Center for Conservation at the University of Leuven, holder of the RLICC UNESCO Chair since 2008. He was member of the Research Council of KU Leuven from 2016 until 2020. He is one of the initiators of Hercule, the KU Leuven Institute for Cultural Heritage. He is member of ICOMOS Belgium and former Secretary General of ICOMOS International Scientific Committee on Structures, Monument Watch Flanders, WTA RILM, and member of the Council of Europa Nostra since 2015. He is the chair of the conservation jury for the European Heritage Europa Nostra Awards, and he represents Europa Nostra in the advisory board of the Joint Programming Initiative on Cultural and Heritage and Global Change. He is involved in activities of periodic reporting on World Heritage in the Arab region, in projects in Lebanon and Jordan, UNESCO World Heritage Sites, in a research collaboration in Ecuador and Cuba, and he was a visiting scholar at the Getty Conservation Institute in Los Angeles between 2002 and 2003. Professor Van Balen will be speaking about KU Leuven, the Cultural Heritage Institute, Hercule, towards a common transition.
What I would like to share with you is some experiences that we are dealing with university. And I just, during your talk, Hanna, I also added a slide, which comes from a statement which I translated from Dutch to English from just something on the journal today, but you will see why it's coming up. So what is the context? Within KU Leuven, the university thought that it would be interesting to develop institutes, and the basic idea of those institutes would be to promote interdisciplinary networks within university and to promote interdisciplinary collaboration. This is something which was happening at the moment that yet we were thinking about bringing interdisciplinary research, but not only interdisciplinary research, also different organizations within the universities that are working with cultural heritage. And that also has triggered another governance model for our institute compared to what many of the other ones, because many of the other institutes are basically looking at doing research, looking for let's say, collaboration for European projects, collaborating with other partners out of the university, but they are always researchers. And we, of course, realize that when you're thinking about cultural heritage and the University of Leuven, which is soon becoming 600 years old, we are not only talking about researchers, we are talking about services that are taking care of books, that are taking care of archives, that have collections of objects, but it's also about ourselves. It's all about students recognizing that cultural heritage is something which is around them, which in a certain sense influence them. And it's also the case for researchers. From that, we figured out that maybe one way of working together would be to work radically different. And we have developed, as I will show you later, our institute based on the principles of the commons. But let me try to explain you a little bit about it. And what you see here, you can look at the website address at the top right, so you can inform yourself about what Hercule, which is the name of our institute, stands for. So, of course, in that preparation, we have been discussing quite a lot with different colleagues, and I think, yeah, this slide that you see here is from one of those books, which I think is an interesting reading. because it brings together many different aspects about how commons are organized. But what we learned, or what I think is most important, which is from one hand explaining why commons is interesting to be dealing with within university, but at the same time, another way of understanding what cultural heritage is about is the fact that the stewardship for the commons is based on shared values, norms, and customs. And I think this is something which helps, according to me, very much the discussion about when we are talking about heritage. We can say that something is not cultural heritage if it is not shared, and it is only cultural heritage because we share it. And so it's because many people within the community agree on that. And it's exactly the comment that Hanna was making about communities, which triggered me to add this next slide, one of the next slides that you will see. So we understood that culture is about shared values. It's about sharing them, but also creating them. And in a certain sense, I think that may be a little bit different in terms of when you look at culture at broader sense than to cultural heritage, and that it is contributing to well-being. And the sentence about modern economy and employment is exactly this, because one of the key issues about, or one of the key aspects which goes together with values is about understanding how do you measure values. This is about understanding that you share something. And usually in the past, we very often have been trying to always redirect our understanding about values and about sharing values to euros or dollars or whatever currency we are looking at. And one of the key elements of the value creation and the concept of commons is to create benefits. Values, monetary values can be benefits, but there are many different ways of dealing with benefits. And one of the things that Hanna was referring to, if we take it from the perspective of investment or the use of resources, was the word time that she was using. And so giving time is not only something that you can redirect by euros to understand how much it stands for, but it has its value by itself. And definitely if you look to diversities of communities. And so, so in the case of cultural heritage, it's a little bit more narrow than the broader cultural context, but nevertheless, the way we look at cultural heritage in our institute is very much open towards the culture in general. So therefore, we thought that the Hercule community should go beyond researchers and their sponsors. I explained it as cultural heritage reflects values shared by a wide and diverse part of the university community in a very inclusive way. And so I think it has many words, which are each of them very of great importance. For example, the aspect of inclusivity. Now, we didn't invent anything, but I think you may know that in 2009 there was a Nobel Prize. I think strictly spoken, it's not a Nobel Prize, but it's something at least equivalent. So it is Eleanor Alstrom who has developed some basic concepts, and I will not go into details of it, but it summarizes a number of things. It summarizes the fact that it's important to identify boundaries. It's important to identify rules. It's important to have sanctioning systems, and it is important to have conflict resolution. So all of this in one way or another means that your governance system should take into account those different needs. And I will not go into the details. If you go a little bit closer, you will particularly see this kind of experiences, because corporations are even maybe sometimes older than the way we thought and think about commons. And what is particularly interesting, I think, also in the relationship with Hercule, is, for example, to address the importance of education and training and information. And so the aspect of communication and sharing becomes a very important element. It's not so explicit in the things that Alstrom is referring to. But of course, everything which is related to the democratic member and control. And here comes the statement that comes from the newspaper today. I thought it was interesting because, and I shared it in LinkedIn, so some of you, but it was in Dutch when I shared it, because I think it explains in some way something what Hanna was sometimes referring to. It's about what are communities? And communities sometimes have the tendency, of course, to identify their identities and to identify their values. And of course, we sometimes have the tendency in saying, yes, okay, yeah, we have these communities, and we are, if you look at Europe, a kind of a huge diversity of communities which each share different values. But the point is, how do they relate with each other? And do they have fight to each other? How do we look at that? And I was usually saying, okay, we should be working respectfully. But I think that this is in a certain sense interesting, because in that article of Ignace de Vries, who is a philosopher in Belgium, and he was talking about tolerance is not outdated, because sometimes we then start to say about maybe tolerance is the way how you can acknowledge diversities of values and diversities of communities and diversity of cultures. But he says it's quite interesting. If we want to turn that struggle, it's about understanding tolerance in the right way and to use tolerance into a peaceful coexistence of divergent values. We need a new interpretation of tolerance, and it should be based on two things. And I think that's important. The first one, recognizing that our lives encompass more than what we consume together. And that brings us back to the discussion about euros and the very, let's say, consumistic way that we look at it, and aligning our divergent core beliefs. And so that it means that we have to respect them in a certain sense, but at the same time, we have to acknowledge our own values and take those things on board. So I thought it was just interesting. It's from the newspaper of today, so it's very fresh. So I will not go and dwell too much in the details, but what I wanted to share with this slides, of course, the first one is the book I was referring to from Peer-to-Peer, the Commons Manifesto of Michel Bouwens. You can download it. It's for free, and I think it's interesting reading. And of course, on the Peer-to-Peer Foundation, you can find a lot of information. And the background of the slide, maybe not very visible, is that there is also something which exists, and which is the International Association for the Study of the Commons. So there is also an academic environment working worldwide on understanding how commons functions and which are the good and the bad practices, or the things that work and do not work, as saying it in the words of Hanna. Closer by in Belgium, we have SmartBee, which is, I think Michel Bouwens, of course, knows it. He is related to that. But together with the Inspiral Foundation, there are examples of how people in the cultural sector and in the design industry, many of them are working in that field, are seeking ways to collaborate. And particularly Inspiral is a very interesting example about how far you can go in working according to the principles of the commons, even if you are not limiting yourself to non-for-profit organizations. So also how you can in a certain sense create benefits, partially benefits in terms of monetary benefits, but how you can work that further. And both of those things are particularly interesting because if you overall look to the different type of industries and sectors which are working, the reason why those two are probably directing themselves in that way is basically because they are very small players. And so they have a huge community of very, very small actors seeking for ways to work together instead of working aside each other, which is very often helping, or which is very often happening in the cultural sector, particularly for example, in the design sector. So just to say, there are very inspiring examples. And for example, here's what Inspiral is doing. And they share all of this information. You can find handbooks about it. And so we are sharing money, we are sharing power, we are sharing information. So it says everything about the fact that even if you are in a more, let's say, entrepreneurial way of thinking, that commons is not against this kind of ideas. It's on the contrary, that you can facilitate this kind of activity. Yeah. And it can go, of course, even much further, like the collaborative entrepreneurship that I share here with you as some links that you can find. Very well-known examples, of course, are the Creative Commons, something that is we are usually, or you know it very well from the type of copyright, copyleft discussion. And all of this worldwide organization, each of them, of course, have their own way of collaborating, identifying their governance system. And based on all of that, in some way or another, we developed ours as Hercule. And so what is important in this particular context is that to recognize the possibility of becoming member of an organization. As being part of the organization, our rules are that you should be linked in one way or another to the university, but you can be an external organization becoming member of Hercule as long as there is a link with one member within the KU Leuven community. All activities are developed by working groups, so there is a very open structure of taking initiatives for working groups to work together. For example, we have a working group, I think we have about 9 working groups for the moment. One which is, for example, dealing with how do we set the rules for Hercule, so it can be related to your own functioning and your organization, but it can also be more thematic. For example, the whole discussion about decolonization of cultural heritage is one working group where we have quite a lot of active people involved, working together, thinking together, and also looking jointly to set up projects within, let's say, within the university, with European projects as well with other actors. Okay, to make it work, what is important is that you have, of course, a kind of an executive board, which is supervising things, which is facilitating what the community wants to deal with. But what is as important is to have, and you saw it, for example, in the example of the previous case that I was seeing here with the Creative Commons, that you have something which is also a membership committee. That recalls what Alstom was saying about the fact that you should, in a certain sense, understand your limits and at the same time identify what is working and what is not working. And the steering committee as an organization or a committee so of members here, where we also have a number of external visionary people inside, has the idea of looking at the long term. And also in a certain sense, and I think that's important to close here, to say that all of this is not the normal way how the university is working. So we are really a bit challenging our own university in working in different ways to understand, for example, the co-creation of benefits in a different way as the normal indicators of the university are usually developed. So I'm happy to stop here. I hope I didn't spend too much more time than necessary, and I'm happy to join the discussion.
Thank you very much, Koen, for this inspiring presentation, actually, which sets the ground for very innovative interdisciplinary collaboration within such an important institution like KU Leuven. By embracing the commons principles, you're pushing borders and trying to work with different departments, which maybe it could be seen as very innovative approach. For example, from my understanding, you also work with the medicine department, you work also with the administrative staff, you work with students. So it's really enlarging the debate towards giving the opportunity to everyone to contribute to what cultural heritage is and what is at stake. Our third speaker today is Matthieu Goeury, who's an artist worker based in Brussels. He's currently the artistic coordinator at Vooruit in Ghent, Belgium. He's also active as a producer and curator. Matthieu works in the field of performing arts. His trajectory has led him to create a workspace for emerging artists, participate in the launch of the Centre Pompidou in Metz, and program at Vooruit in Ghent. During the last years, he created and co-created the festivals Possible Futures and Impossible Futures. Smells Like Circus, Just a Food Program, Same But Different, GIF, Ghent International Festival, among others. He was also involved in the programming of Sant'Angelo Festival in Italy and Fusebox Festival in Austin, Texas. He tries to apply strong ethical principles to the projects he develops based on social political engagement, solidarity, equity, diversity, pragmatism, and responsible seriousness.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. Yes.
I first want to say two things. I thank you so much to Koen and Hanna for the presentation. That is super interesting, and I'm happy to delve a bit more in the initiatives you're developing in your local context. It seems super interesting. I'm very happy and honored to be joining this talk today. The second thing I should say is I am not at all a fan of basketball, but I have to squat. My kid's bedroom is having some friends over, so I've been pushed away in the kids' bedrooms. Sorry for the exciting background. So as Ruba introduced, I'm the artistic coordinator of Vooruit, which is an art center based in Ghent in Belgium. Quite a large project and building as well. This is a building actually, so it's itself also a heritage building built in 1913 by the socialist movement, not the Socialist Party, really the movement of workers at the beginning of a 20th century, who in the frame of the World Exhibition that was happening in Ghent that year wanted to show the world the power of the socialist movement. It got built directly with the intention to host very different kind of activities, from Horeca, food, parties and meals and balls, but also directly also with cinema, with culture in it, and of course a lot of political debates, a gym. It had a lot of different activities, and also a lot of different lives until in the 50s, when it kind of got abandoned. So it was a building that was a bit forgotten by the people in Ghent until the end of the 70s, when a group of youngsters entered the building again and discovered these amazing facilities. It was in a very, very bad state, and this led in 1982 to the reopening of the building, of the project, as an art center recognized by the Flemish community of Belgium. Since then, the project grew until 2017, where Vooruit became a Kunstinstelling, so an arts institution, literally. What does it mean? I will explain it in a minute, but there are in Flanders 7 Kunstinstellingen, 7 arts institutions. So Vooruit and Concertgebouw in Brugge are the new ones since 2017, and then originally there's 5 others: the Single in Antwerp, the Ancienne Belgique, the music venue in Brussels, the Opera Ballet Vlaanderen in Ghent and Antwerp, also the Brussels Philharmonic and the Antwerp Symphony Orchestra. So we joined that club of very privileged organization. The reason why I mention privilege is as an arts institution in Flanders, so as one of these 7 organizations, one could say that your funding is very stable, and your missions are also very stable. They are very stable because you actually have to fulfill all the functions and all the missions of the Flemish Arts Decree. There are 5 of them, so presenting of artworks, work on audience and community participation, work on the production of art works, research, so fundamental research before a project gets created and presented. So the whole fundamental research that happens in the first instance, and then the reflection on the arts, which in Vooruit we also push towards arts and society. And it's, of course, it's a lot. It's also very, very difficult to fulfill these missions, in the sense that we don't have the same rhythm. A presentation function, so presenting artworks, means basically that you have to, one after the other, present and develop an audience that buys tickets, or are in a sense customers. When actually, if you take the function participation, it is a work that is very slow and very deep, and actually takes a lot of time to get to its objectives and realizations. So in that sense, when we became an arts institution in 2017, it was for us very very difficult to imagine that we could do what we were supposed to do. So we had 2 solutions instead. One of them was basically fake it, and say, okay, we're going to do one production a year or one participative project with a specific community a year, and say, okay, we are fulfilling the participation or the production function. We didn't want to do this. We really felt, okay, because we are a privileged organization, we have a privileged status in Flanders as a big organization. Again, we wanted to really deliver for our communities, but also for the sector. So the way we did it is by becoming what we call a platform. A platform that you can read on the right. Actually, it's our mission statement. But a platform in the sense that instead of being an organization that decides of everything that happens in its program, in its walls, what we try to do, the way we try to work, is actually in a very transparent way put the resources we have, and there are many. We are a very privileged organization. Fantastic technical team, fantastic cafe, an amazing audience, technical material, a budget, of course, a building that is fantastic, and so on and so on. So what we try to do is actually, before developing the program, so instead of choosing ourselves what would happen within the project, we try to actually discuss with a series of partners. We have a small a series of logos of them here, and these partners are very different. They can be cultural partners, other cultural venues like Ente Ghent or Campo. They can also be the university, for example. They can also be a trade union. They can be a private partner. They can be a trade union. They can be a hospital. So it's a very different kind of set of partners we discuss with. And what we try to do is really, indeed, in a very transparent way, start a conversation with these partners to say, okay, what is important for you? What would you develop actually within a project like Vooruit with the resources we have? And of course, we bring our perspective and our own missions we have to fulfill on the table as well. So in a sense, we become this platform of partners that we try to connect also together. And we have a program that is very diverse, because it's done through many inputs. Of course, we keep a sort of regie, we keep a sort of control and dramaturgy of the whole program. But in general, who proposes and who develops projects in the project of Vooruit is very different. And that was one reason we actually decided to stop saying, when people ask me what is the artistic vision or what is the artistic program of Vooruit, my answer is like, I don't know, tell me. In the sense, because there are so many people involved that it's actually impossible to frame everything within one thematic or one direction. And instead, we use this fantastic motto that has been created by a former dramaturg. Nothing for everyone, something for everybody, which is of course something we don't always reach, but it's what we try to reach all the time. Meaning that in our program we try that what we present, what we develop, is not commercial, it's not only entertaining, it is quite contemporary, it is quite challenging, it is really embedded in what the arts field produces today. So it is a challenge sometimes for the audience, but within the diversity of what we present, we hope that there is something for everybody. To be honest, we are a bit cheating, because one of the things we do also is running a bar and restaurant, and at least, you know, if people come to eat a spaghetti or have a good beer at the cafe, I'm sure everyone will find their thing in Vooruit, at least in the food activity we develop. But in general, we try for the program to be as exploded and as open as possible. So when we did that shift of programming in 2017, when we became this art institution, we realized that we could not function as we used to. That was the organigram of Vooruit in 2016. As you can imagine, it's a very traditional organigram, in the sense that it had a general director, 5 smaller directors, and then departments under. There's something I would say that in the arts, in terms of the way we are organized and managed today, there's a tendency a bit in the arts to be always thinking that we are 5 steps ahead from a lot of other sectors of society. It's unfortunately not true. So a lot of organizations are still run with that kind of model, and we felt basically having become this organization that was inviting a lot of stakeholders, a lot of diversity in its program, in its activities, in of course in the communities that were coming in the building. We felt that we could not function anymore in this kind of pyramidal model. So what we did is work on a new organigram, which looks like this now. It's of course much more inclusive. As you can see, it starts with the first circle, that is the actual employees of the organization. We are 92 in the organization, so it's quite a lot. These colleagues and workers of the project are still organized quite traditionally in a way, in the sense that each of them and each of us actually is part of what we call an expert team, in the sense that, for example, there's a team artistic, there's a team of the bar at night, there's a team of production, communication, and so on. There's a bit of a fantasy when we try to reinvent the organization of the structure of cultural organizations that we're going to become, and when we talk about horizontalization, for example, but the project is going to become completely flat, that everyone has to decide of everything. This is really not what we did, and I think I would not advise any big organization to do this. But what we try to do is actually keep still a sort of hierarchy, but within that hierarchical model, to give the possibility for colleagues, for this first circle, to take more responsibility than their original function. And I will come back to this in a minute to close my presentation. So these colleagues are organized in this expert team. Each expert team has got a coordinator that meets every Tuesday morning. That was this morning in the coordination team. That's the green circle you see here. What does the coordination team does? It actually manages the organization on a weekly basis. It ensures the continuity of what we do, and it has two very important things. The first thing is that the agenda is open to everyone in the organization. That means everyone can add an item to the agenda, and also the report is shared with everyone in the organization without being amended at all. That means there's a lot of transparency of all the decisions that are taken in terms of continuous management and weekly management, but is shared with everyone in the organization. Where the horizontalization happens and when the structure is I think really functioning at the moment is in the pink circle, the permanent realization teams. So these teams are basically a place for the organization to learn and to make its procedures better. I take the example of a music one, for example. So there's a music permanent realization team. It's not where the program is made. That is made actually within the artistic team and in majority, again, within the platform model with a lot of partners. But within the music realization teams, what is interesting is that actually one of the producers, so it's also not the programmer or the artistic director, but pilots that team. It's a producer of music. It will make sure that the concerts we organize, every time we are learning from them. That means that if a new thing is installed, let's say a new way of welcoming the bands, a new way of working with a sound rental or something like this, that we look at it, we evaluate it, and we take it for the next one. I think one of the big problems in organizations, in big cultural organizations, is that we tend to repeat a lot of the same activities. At the end of the day, we organize concerts, we organize theater shows, and so on and so on. But we are really bad at learning actually how to do it repeatedly, and almost every project is kind of started from scratch. So these teams actually are really, and have been for some years now, making our working better and making our idea evaluation and the learnings of each of the activities we do continuing for the next activities. This is just one example. We need to talk a lot more about this, but I don't think we have the time here. And then the last team that we have is the future teams. That's a yellow circle. There's 7 of them. I will mention them because they are quite important. There's the green Vooruit, that's the whole sustainability, ecology question. There's the cafe and the restaurants. There's the social Vooruit, the whole question of decentralization, inclusion, decolonization. There's a digital question. There's the strategic, commercial, and financial one. And then there's the building and the monument one. As I said, the Vooruit is also a protected monument. And then there's the program and the artistic vision one. And these teams, they don't meet a lot. We meet maybe twice a year maximum. And the idea is that we ask ourselves the question: where do we want to be in 5 years, and where do we want to be in 10 years? And to be honest, actually asking yourself this question, where it's actually a way to ask yourself what needs to change, what needs to happen now. But of course, using this future perspective really allows you to dream and to be a bit more radical. And what happens, actually, we created a space for people to be radical and deliver radical ideas, but are not confronted to the current reality. But actually, by announcing them, by sharing them, they become a possibility. So it's really a way for us to challenge the way we work and to think completely outside the box. The last thing I will mention is the little jerseys, the little T-shirts that you see at the bottom. Just to say that was actually the title that Ruba proposed for the presentation. That that each worker in the organization indeed has the possibility to have a function. They have a function, for example, mine is artistic coordinator, but we can also, and that's how the structure is financially and in terms of human resources also managed, we can take another role, a role that can be the leader of a permanent realization team, or the leader of a two-coms team, or the participant in one of these teams, meaning that each worker actually can involve itself or herself in the organization in a different way than actually what is on the main task. And that has really created actually a very interesting thing, and I will finish on that, is that what we see happens after 3-4 years of working like this is that the cross understanding, the cross knowledge of what each of the colleagues do is much bigger. That means, honestly, today, a lot of my colleagues and myself included, we know what a technician will do. We know what someone at the cafe will do. We know what the communication person will do, which creates a lot of empathy and creates also a lot of solidarity within the organization.
Thank you very much, Matthieu. I'm really impressed by your presentation, and it's a fantastic way of concluding, let's say, the presentations and opening the space for a couple of questions. I pretty much enjoyed the fact that you closed actually your remarks by speaking about empathy and solidarity, which is something we are more and more in need of. And we're lacking lately because of the pandemic. It's very important to see how your entrepreneurial journey started in a way because you decided to challenge your traditional organigram, and you actually managed to develop a very agile governance models where people could change roles and responsibilities, but also adapt to new needs in due time. So congratulations. It's a very interesting model from which we should all learn from. And it's great to see how cultural and creative actors can teach even business on how to become more agile, adaptable, and to encompass solidarity as well.